So this is something new that we're trying to do here at Seneca Global, where we, often have conversations about what trends are impacting our clients and what we see out in the marketplace and what we need to do as a services firm, as a high-tech services firm, to address the needs of the market. And we have a lot of great internal conversations around, new tools that we should be using, new methodologies, especially in the wake of Gen AI and all the impacts that has had over the last, year and a half, especially, but even beyond that. So what we decided to do here is record some of these conversations, and maybe some insights will pop out that we can share with the greater public. Take advantage of the strong brain power we have here at Seneca Global, and maybe see if we can come up with anything insightful and usable, more importantly, for our audience, for our clients, for our prospects, and just for people who are curious out there on LinkedIn and anywhere else. So just some quick introductions here. My name is Zach Zofer. I'm the Director of Strategic Business Development here at Seneca Global, and I'm kind of the boots on the ground talking to the CIOs and CTOs and everyone who works underneath them about what exactly they're trying to tackle on a day-to-day basis in today's quickly evolving landscape. So it's been interesting. It's been a kind of a whirlwind of the last few years. I've been around this industry for nearly a decade now, and I've seen a few buzzwords. IoT was huge right when I first came on, mobile development. Then cloud kind of was the number one thing everyone was talking about, cloud optimization and infrastructure. And not that those were just buzzwords, and those are still going on. Those are still very much important pieces of the tech landscape right now. I don't think any of them, maybe cloud, but I don't think any of them quite matches the potential and the impact that AI has had in a short time frame. So we chose Gen AI as kind of our first overall topic here. So I'll let you guys give some brief introductions for yourself and your experience, maybe less so on AI, but who you are at Seneca Global, what your background is, and how you come to a delivery engagement. What it is that your role is.
Hi, my name is Jerry Thomas. I'm a VP of Technology. I've been working with Seneca Global for about 7 years now. I'm usually involved in the interface with clients, working with them closely, figuring out the architecture, the solutions, the roadmap from a business standpoint as well as a technology standpoint, and then work closely with the offshore development teams, helping them out whenever possible.
Okay. I'm Durga, working as Assistant VP of Technology, and I will be working with multiple projects that are there in Seneca Global, helping them regarding the architecture and the day-to-day problem they are facing.
And Jerry and Durga, if you could both kind of share, your role as it now has evolved in the wake of Gen AI. We as the delivery leadership here at Seneca Global has kind of tasked you with remaining at the forefront of this, evolving landscape. So, you could talk a little bit about the AI subcommittee and how we're using that to determine new offerings and new delivery models. Just at a very high level, how has AI impacted your work over the last 6 months or a year?
It's been an interesting journey that's the simplest way to put it. The whole ecosystem has changed, and the way you learn, the way you utilize these tools has improved drastically. So there are so many different editors, there are so many different AI tools and models and chat engines and APIs that are available. So the scope or the capability of each of these tools has increased significantly during the last 6 months or a year. And we have seen multiple versions and multiple options of integration. So the kind of explosion in the AI models or LLM marketplace has brought in huge changes on the business standpoint also. So most of our clients are starting to think, or at least starting to implement, how can AI help in different areas, from their business standpoint, from the customer interface standpoint, from the technology footprint standpoint. How can they make the best use of it to improve their existing processes or systems or integrations and data quality?
Right, that's what I'm seeing, and I have, I was just at an event 2 days ago that was all focused on AI in action. And it was
Mhm.
from another large consulting firm that's, at the forefront of a lot of these projects. But the audience, these technologies are new, but not, exceedingly new. They've been around for the last year or so. And one thing that's clear is that the general audience out there sees that there is some value in these AI tools. And they, everyone is rushing, especially the executive level, how do we unlock that value? But despite that, other than just knowing that there's something they should be doing in AI, there's not a lot of direction out there. And what's an easy place to start? People really struggle with coming to terms with what exactly they should start with. How should they begin with their AI journey? Tech companies with like a really with a really savvy CTO, they probably have some ideas, or they can quickly identify their pain points. And if they're hobbyists, they've been keeping up with the tools. But for the average company, this is kind of very different. So we're seeing that these AI use cases and these workloads can vary wildly from use case to use case, from company to company. Jerry, how do we kind of see a good way to address that market? Uh, how do we demystify the potential of AI and turn it into more narrow scope, actionable ideas that are, more bite-sized projects to be able to, chew on, rather than just taking on AI as one size fits all problem solver?
So I feel that a lot of it is due to the wide range that AI makes it possible to implement. So the thing is, it's like you're given a wide buffet of choices. Which do you choose? Where do you start from, right? So it's kind of the similar case with AI. There is so much capability or so much that it unleashes. Sometimes it's just becomes a bottleneck in terms of choosing where to start from. Usually, I mean, what I've seen most of the companies do is they start with a simple chatbot. I mean, chatbot is probably the simplest thing that you can implement utilizing AI. The generative capabilities can be utilized for a wide variety of tasks. It can be data integration, it can be data correction, data cleansing, and these are things that are typically the biggest challenges that we have faced earlier. I mean, you would see unstructured data, extracting data from PDFs where you have names in all kinds of order. The first name is reversed or the last name is first, all kinds of combinations. So you can use a lot of different models, data science models, machine learning models, to identify the elements and tokens. But in our experience, we have seen that generative AI seems to work a lot better. I mean, it can provide much more accuracy. So it all depends on the use cases and the variety of possibilities that are available. You have to take one step at a time. Think about a small piece. How can AI help here? And then work on iteratively improving that particular functionality. Choosing the right model itself is another challenge. I mean, there are so many different models out there now. So you have to experiment, figure out which works best for the use case that you have, and trying to find the right one that fits your requirement, and then move forward. It should always be, it should not be from the perspective, oh, I have to implement AI in my application or product. It should always be business focused first, figuring out what makes sense from a business perspective rather than just following the hype and the buzzwords.
Jerry kind of taps on the fact that, there's a lot of models out there, and they're not all equal in different use cases, right? I think the average user, the consumer out there, just thinks of ChatGPT and that's about it. Maybe
That's
they're
good.
familiar with Gemini, but ChatGPT's kind of become the Kleenex of the AI world these days, right? Where instead of tissue, you say Kleenex. Instead of, GenAI LLM, you say ChatGPT. Durga, can you give a couple of examples that you've seen of other frameworks, other models that work for specific use cases? When it comes to, chatbot, fine. I bet a lot of frameworks can handle that. But what are some examples of niche specific skill sets, or not skill sets, capabilities of a different model that you would use, for a particular use case, specifically that's not ChatGPT?
Uh, well, as Jerry mentioned, it's again move to your use cases, right? For example, if you are taking a regular text-based models, right, where you are prompting a question and expecting a responses, then we can use the generic models that are available, like ChatGPT or OpenAI and Gemini. And if you want to use something specific, which will be using this techniques like quantizations and simplify to your use cases, and especially when you are working with a closed context, right? Because most of the products, they want to work in a closed context with the provided data from the RAG setup, right? So for those, you don't need to go into heavy billion models like 120 billion models like that. It's always fine tuned to your smaller models like a small language model or a tiny models, which is aware of the context and the RAG data what we provide. And we have a lot of use cases so we need to put the models in two different perspectives. One is which is best for your doing your day-to-day activities, and the other one is the productization to solve the specific use cases of your product, either dealing with the data or dealing with the images, data in the sense unstructured data, right? Unstructured data, images, videos. Okay, that's one use case, one bucket I will put into productization. The other one will be your day-to-day regular activities. Either it can be a coding, being a technical person, being it a coding, unit testing, developing, right? You can start using like Sonnet and Gemini, which is sometimes outperforming the existing ChatGPT OpenAI models that are there in the market, right? So that's how I segregate them to solve the needs.
Yeah, that's interesting. That came up at that event that I talked about earlier. The way they framed it, it was very similar to what you just said, which is, there's automation, which is taking a task that can be automated and using AI to do it in a more efficient way rather than writing a custom software program to do it. There's augmentation, which is exactly what you're describing for day-to-day tasks and using AI. I mean, I think that's how the average person's using it, right? Is to just augment their day-to-day use cases. That's what I'm doing, even in business development. But people are doing in all manner of careers these days. And also, enhancement, which is, okay, well, we've got this data. What can we glean from it? What are some new use cases that our organization has not even thought about because it hasn't been possible to take advantage of this? I'm going to go off book a little bit here, and talk about the data side of things. I think there's a big barrier in people's minds that, okay, these LLMs have a lot of potential, but unless your data is structured and ready for it, then they're not going to be useful, right? Unless you have some properly mapped or properly structured or properly tagged data, the AI is only as good as the data that it's feeding from. So can we spend a few minutes just on, some early stage lessons, so maybe some pre-homework people can do if they're trying to set up, a RAG chatbot or a RAG, report generator, what exactly are some limitations if their data is kind of a mess, as I think many organizations are.
So my experience has been completely the opposite way. I mean, spit out absolute garbage. It would extract some information out of it. So the way that you can look at the AI models to a certain extent is that it's a pattern recognizer. It recognizes patterns in whatever context you provide. Even if you provide structured data, it is looking at these columns and cells and then figuring out what's there in those cells and extracting the information. But in terms of unstructured data, like a paragraph of text, it can still make sense out of it because it's able to tokenize and identify the keywords and the sentence elements and everything else. So it's able to extract much more meaningful information just like a human would do. So if you are able to read a text, a paragraph, and you'll be able to identify who's the subject, what's the object, what's the action, what's the adjective, what's the verb. ChatGPT is also able to do that, and it's able to extract information out of it. Even in some cases, when the paragraph or this text is completely, I mean, you would have seen that sometimes when you read a sentence, there are certain letters missing or words missing, but you kind of incorporate that in your reading without even realizing it. A lot of this happens with ChatGPT as well. You can give it a broken sentence and it will fill in the blanks. It basically tries to do a generation of what the sentence would look like and extract information out of it and identify a lot of things. So to answer your question, when you provide structured data, it definitely does. It's much more easier for it to extract information out of it. When you provide unstructured data or things like a paragraph or unformatted text or just a copy paste from a website, it still does a pretty good job of extracting meaningful information out of it. And the best thing about it is that you can actually talk to it. I mean, you can talk to it just like any other human being. How would you interact with it? You could ask a question, it would respond, and you can do a lot of back forth discussion on what a content looks like, and to a certain and you can actually tell ChatGPT or a model to generate the prompt to help you out in the future. Given a certain example, you could discuss out how to extract information and then come up with a conclusion and then generate the prompt and then use it in your project. So there are the possibilities are kind of endless.
Durga, do you agree with that? That, the bar is not so high on a data standpoint as people might think? Or just do you think that, oh, well, sure, maybe ChatGPT will do a better job than you think of quantifying that data or organizing that data, but does that increase the chance of hallucinations? Does it, do you have to be all the more careful when you're double checking the homework of the LLM model?
Yeah, with my experience, the prompt engineering skills play a crucial role, especially when you have unstructured data, like you said. You are categorized into structured and unstructured, right? So structured data may be straightforward because you are giving it in a proper format. When it comes to unstructured data, one single prompt, you cannot get the proper inferences, right? You need to start reiterating your prompt like multiple times. You need to refine, sorry, my bad. You need to refine the prompt multiple times till you get the accurate answers. Now, as Jerry said earlier, you can use the chat GPT itself to evaluate the output provided by them. So for example, we can use models like BERT, where you have an augmenter as well as discriminator, where one try to prove itself, the other one says, hey, you are doing it wrong, right? Which is the perfect use case for the example, whatever you said, especially for the unstructured data. Again, it depends on how you're choosing it and refining of your prompt and using the GPTs or the models that are available to reevaluate your output.
Yeah, adding to what Durga said, I mean, when you're prompting, providing examples helps a lot. Not just explaining what you are expecting out of it, but given an example, if you see this pattern, this is the output that I'm expecting, something like that helps a lot. in ensuring that you are extracting the right kind of information out of it, and then ensuring that you ask the chat GPT or the model to verify its output. In some cases, it can do guesses. I mean, what's 2 plus 2? Yeah, it might just generate a random number, which is the expected output. But you can ask it to validate the result as well. So it can calculations it can definitely do. In some cases, you would have to ask it in a little bit roundabout way to validate the answer.
So you're basically enabling the chatbot or the model to check its own homework,
Yep.
to be its own teacher. It's interesting when you mention prompt engineering. I think that's one of those terms that is maybe misunderstood because people, the layman, and I speak for the layman here, people seem to think that, oh, well, that's just a fancy word for they know how to talk to a computer, which is true, I think, to some degree. But prompt engineering, understanding being a good prompt engineer, from my standpoint, means being able to understand how a model works and how it sources its information and how it gathers its answers and produces those answers. And then formatting your requests or your parameters accordingly, right? What are some pitfalls of bad prompt engineering, right? If you ask the slightly wrong prompt, are you just going to spin down a black hole where, you set the model on a bad learning path, and now we got to roll back 10 iterations to get back to where you went wrong? Or are there any safeguards you can kind of put in place to make sure that the users are not tampering with the effectiveness of any given model they're working with?
So, I mean, when we are talking about the integration of AI models from a chat perspective into any product, you would also add some additional checks and safeguards in terms of a system prompt, which are the restrictions that you put in place so that, okay, it doesn't go outside the bounds. When you are talking about prompt engineering, you can think about it more like how you are providing instructions to a greenhorn, somebody who is completely new to a particular job, right? If you provide minimal instruction, it will provide a shoddy output. If you provide detailed instructions, it provides much better output. So how you explain things to the AI model will result in how the output comes out. The more detailed your instructions are, the more clearer they are, the better the output. The more vague they are, the vague the responses will be, or inefficient that it can be. But it ultimately it leads to a point where you learn how to speak its language. As you rightly said, knowing how to speak to your the person whom you are conversing with is very important. So prompt engineering just takes it to a different level, because you have to figure out how the system is thinking, how does it generate the output that it is generating, what is it missing out on, what is the pattern that it did not understand or realize when it is extracting information, something that you see but it's not able to see. I mean, there are cases where it's able to see things that you are not able to see. So you have to figure out what are the cases that it works best and how to guide it towards the solution that you want it to. So I usually think about it like, if I am taking in a new junior developer, how do I guide that person to be most effective in resulting the output? So as long as you provide the right kind of information, it generates the right kind of output. And then sometimes it's just not capable enough. So you have to look for an alternative developer or an alternative model.
Sure. Okay. So let's dig into the chatbot use case a little bit. We've thrown around the term RAG a little bit, but I keep learning. I work in a tech company, so I take it for granted to some degree but then when I'm talking to, someone out in the wild, they'll say, oh, well, I've got security concerns, or, there's so many hallucinations with ChatGPT because I ask it about data and it pulls from all these random sources and you don't know what it's going to get. Yeah, why don't we explain briefly what RAG is and how it kind of narrows the scope for a specific business use case, and makes it a little bit more valuable than just, uh, off the shelf, OpenAI, ChatGPT, chatbot style. Durga, can you explain kind of what RAG is for me?
Sure. RAG is something like retrieval augmentation, where any model, LLM model have pre-trained with a set of data, right? Any question you have provided, any prompt you have provided out of that context, it will go ahead and hallucinate itself. So we need to ensure that you are not going into deep thinking to the giving a prompt which is going into the research mode or deep thinking to that model. And if you take an example, let's say you are into a manufacturing company, right? Uh, let's take an example. You are a shoe manufacturing company, right? And you have a variety of shoes. Now, if you ask a random question, what size of shoe may fit my size, right? And I am not setting any context to the model, then it will go ahead and, as Jerry said, it will go ahead to the web and it start deep researching on its own, going to the web, and then it try to hallucinate and provide out of the box content data. Whereas with the retrieval augmentation RAG models, you provide the preset of data with it in the form of embedding. Okay. And you are restricting the context of the model, right? So the boundary parameters are very crucial so that it won't go outside the data what we have provided to the model, right? So that's where the RAGs comes into the picture. So we have the predefined data which was used for this context. Whereas if someone asks it, right? Is there any leather shoes that matches my needs, right? If you are not if you are as a manufacturer, you are not into manufacturing leather shoes, right? You need to explicitly state in the RAG model, in the prompt or while creating the model, don't go, if it's something on the leather shoes, say I don't have any information on it, right? So that means you are restricting the context of the model. You are predefining the steps on the or setting up the boundaries of the model on what amount of thinking it can do, right, outside of the context. And since the data is provided by us and we are ensuring that the boundary was set against the data, any questions you have provided will be based on the data what you have provided as part of the RAG.
Yeah, let me kind of drill down on your shoe analogy a little bit here, because I like that. So, you know, what I'm hearing is if you've trained a chatbot, let's say you're Joe's shoe company, right? And you don't have leather shoes. You if you don't properly box in and set parameters for your chatbot, you don't want a situation where someone says, "Hey, I'm a size 8. I want leather shoes." If Joe's shoe company doesn't make leather shoes, you don't want the chatbot to say, "Oh, well, sure, go to Amazon. It's right over here. Here's this alternate, shoe." Or, "Oh, we can make you a shoe," and then it goes to manufacturing, and then, uh-oh, we've promised a shoe that we can't make. Versus a more sophisticated version of that response, if properly engineered, or if you set up the chatbots to be more effective, might say, "Oh, well, we don't have leather shoes, but we do have this similar material that is also, um, you know,
Leather-like in
it's
nature.
also
Yeah.
resilient to the elements, and it also has like a sheen to it, or whatever it might be. Here's our next best option. Are you interested in this?" That sounds like, hey, use what I understand is, the average user is that a RAG model is just narrowing the scope of a chatbot to the data and the answers and the logic that is relevant to the company at hand,
I
specifically.
mean, to a certain extent, that's correct. So RAG itself means retrieval augmentation. So what you're doing is you're augmenting its default retrieval mechanism by adding a specific data that it knows nothing about. So Joe's shoe company has a certain set of data. There is a certain set of shoes or content that it can generate, the process, internal processes, the hierarchy. All of those things are basically something that ChatGPT or any other model does not know anything about. What you are providing to the chatbot or the model by utilizing RAG is an additional data set that it can utilize as a reference point. Now, when Durga was talking about boundary conditions, those are system prompts that are an addition on top of a RAG model. A RAG is just addition of augmenting the data set that it can respond out of. But adding the boundary conditions as a system prompt allows us to set restrictions, say, don't answer anything about Amazon shopping. Focus on the data set that we have provided and don't answer anything outside of the topic or content that the user is asking about. Stick to the content that we have provided. That's a system prompt. So when you're utilizing ChatGPT or any other model with RAG, you also want to provide a limitation on what the user is interacting with. And that's what the boundary condition or the system prompt handles. So if we just think about only RAG is just adding one more data set. You can pick up your organization global hierarchy document or policy document and upload it to ChatGPT, and you can create a RAG model. But that does not stop ChatGPT from responding to questions outside of the boundary of that particular custom content.
In and of itself, you need to add those boundaries. So that's actually educational for me. I kind of thought that RAG inherently included some of those boundaries, but it makes sense that you're just adding a data set, and then you need to segment and isolate that data set if that's what you want to do.
You're basically trying to focus it out. I mean, you're thinking about when you look at ChatGPT, for example, it's a generic model. You can ask anything under the sun and it will generate something out of nothing. It may be true, it may be false. You have to put your thinking hat on to figure out whether it's the right answer or the wrong answer, or validate what it responds. And if you see on ChatGPT's website itself, it says ChatGPT is prone to hallucinations. Answers may not be truthful or correct, right? So when you want to do something specific, something narrower, you want to focus on one particular functionality. I am a sales agent at Joe's Shoes, for example. So it has to think and behave like a sales agent of Joe's Shoes. It should not be selling shoes outside of Joe's agents. It should be selling shoes that are available within Joe's agent, and then figure out. So that's the personality or the functionality associated with the RAG model. This is how you explain it to behave in a specific way. That's an add-on in terms of the system prompt, or how you guide that particular system to behave.
Got it. Well, it sounds like, yeah, we've kind of known this, and you tapped that in the beginning of this conversation, that chatbots are one of the easiest to implement and the easiest to see some value on. But that's not to say that there aren't some best practices you should follow to avoid, mistakenly just setting up a chatbot that either is prone to hallucinations or does not have these boundaries that we're talking about. Like anything else, you don't want to just charge head first and rush something into production. But what I've kind of seen, is the way that AI adoption has been happening at the companies that I'm talking with is, individual users will just start messing around with something and they'll start to see the value for themselves. And then they start pushing their executive leadership. Hey, we should be using these tools. Look how it's improved my productivity. Oh, I wish, we had ChatGPT, but specific to our exhaustive inventory that's all a mess of data. And, when I'm trying to make a sale or look up an invoice if I'm in finance or things of this nature, it seems to be there's a lot of internal use cases that can quickly prove some ROI for companies. Almost any company, could benefit from some sort of internal interface. Even us, we're not a massive company, right? But we do have a pretty extensive history of statements of work and, long-term contracts that are sometimes 13, 14 years old, and they have 4 addendums to them, and only 3 of the addenda are, active right now. And sometimes I think, oh man, we should have, instead of just me digging through SharePoint, through 15 years of contract history, what if we just, built an internal chatbot and I could say, oh, okay, at client X, what are the active contracts? What are we billing right now, and what are our terms? And it should be able to synthesize that information a lot faster. And that's a pretty small data set. When we're talking about an enterprise level company that has thousands of vendors and millions of products on their lines, I have to think that using these AI models, these bounded RAG models, could provide a lot of value if set up properly.
But actually, in those particular cases, the challenge is that the data changes on a periodic basis, right? Your contracts are not static. There are new contracts that are being formed. There is new additional information that is being added. So that kind of data is not really suitable for a RAG implementation. RAG is most suitable for when you have static information that does not change significantly over a period of time. Your product portfolio might be one possible scenario, but
Sure.
if you're thinking about information like contracts where you want to look into the data and you want to fetch information about a specific contract from a system by just talking to a bot, the assistance API or the assistance model is much more suitable for that. So it allows you to integrate an existing system with the chatbot engine utilizing the native chat-like interface. You can ask it a question, and since the model has been configured to integrate with an internal system, the function calling takes over and fetches the right kind of information, and you can interact with it. So RAG is, as I said, is typically more suitable for static content, things that does not change very frequently. It's fixed data files like PDF documents, Word documents, spreadsheets, presentations, stuff like that. You can feed it to the model and it stays fixed over a period of time. If you have things that change dynamically, like system data, contracts, invoices, orders, and all that stuff, then the function calling interface is much more suitable for that kind of a requirement.
Understood. Durga, in your experience kind of implementing some of these solutions, both internally and with clients, have there been any sticking points where people struggle to adopt, the mindset or the technologies, or on the reverse side, overuse it, over rely on it without, checking to see accuracy? We talked about it with development, right, as a development augmented tool, and that's a whole separate conversation that we'll probably have another session for. But I just quickly, I wanted to ask if you're seeing adoption be, somewhat of an easy process, or if there's some pitfalls that you're recognizing regularly that, oh, okay, well, maybe a high level developer can understand how the model works quickly, but then when you roll it out to a larger user base, that doesn't know how to set expectations for their own, whatever we've set up for them. Any thoughts there? It's kind of a broad and open question, so feel free to answer it however you like.
See, most of the product companies who want to productize the AI, they prefer to go with RAG-based models. Okay, because these models won't fix the reasoning errors or poor synthesis of your data and all those things, right? It's all what you provide and setting up the boundaries to them, right? And there are also trade-offs using the models, right? Basically, when you are using an additional infrastructure on top of these AI models like a vector DB or retrieval pipelines, as Jerry spoken about the functional interfaces, right? They add on to the retrieval latencies. Okay, so you also need to consider when you are using a model or relying on a model. Okay, what is your primary use case? Whether you want to do a deep thinking and then respond back, or you want to do it in a closed context with the provided data model set, and And most of the clients which we work with, they talk about the security primarily. Okay, instead of using a common models that are shared by all people, though most of the LLM providers are hosted LLM providers, they claim that we don't train our data, but there are still a lot of questions that are coming up from the security point of view, and we taking a decision whether we want to host it internally, you know, and ensure that it is not having any shared space, right? Using the cloud-based, uh, cloud-hosted models, right? That's one important thing. How you want to do it, because security and whether you want to do a closed context model with a RAG, providing RAG on top of it, or it's simple a prompt engineering mechanism where what you call you just ask some random questions or generate an image and it start providing to you. So in a way, most of the time these are the major questions that was raised when people are asking about the AI usage, primarily the security. Yes, they are depending on the RAG models a lot to solve a specific use cases. Okay. And also the choosing the right LLM models will also make sense, because as Jerry has mentioned, choosing the right LLM models, because sometimes the more you use, the more like you are habituated to that model, and you are used to, you want to use that one in the productization of your uh, in your productization, but it may not be an apt model, right? Over the period, so we need to also see various factors like how easily it can be optimized, and its support, and the security aspects, and leveraging it for the other use cases that are there within the system. And also, one LLM model may not solve all the problems that you have in your enterprise level organization. Sometimes you have to go with multiple LLM models, and sometimes you need to change them. One model input has to go to the other model input. Sorry, output of one model has to go to the other model input, and then they share the processing data that is in the system, right? So all these use cases has to be considered, okay, when you are taking a decisions at the enterprise levels.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, that's I think you're kind of tapping on what our next topics are going to be. Uh, questions to be asking when you're onboarding a new AI project. And security. What are some security concerns you should be thinking about when you're rolling out an AI model for any use case in an organization. There's a lot of implications there, and there's a lot of fear out there that if, oh well, we know there's an ROI to this, but there's also a heavy risk depending on your industry, right? I was just talking to someone in healthcare, and there's a lot of fear in healthcare just around setting an AI loose, and suddenly you're in violation of HIPAA, and I just spent 2 months on this project, and yeah, it looked cool, but now I'm facing millions of dollars in fines from HIPAA because I accidentally exposed data or handled it. I mishandled the data that I needed. So maybe we'll have a separate conversation about security, as well as LLM models and their various strengths, and how you can nest those models to kind of rely on each other's strengths, and create a more robust and specific solution for a business use case. Before we drop, I just kind of thought of you know a separate topic, which is give me one example of a way in your personal life you've started using AI. Outside of, clients or prospects or even internal work. What's some way that you've used AI, just for yourself, completely outside of work in the last, 3-4 months?
I like to use AI as a sounding board. I mean, any idea that comes to mind, I would just discuss with it, think about it, and figure out what I want to do with it. I mean, it's a good sounding board. I mean, when you don't have anybody else to talk to, you can
No,
talk
it
to
sounds like
that.
you're sick of talking to me and Durga, Jerry. That's what it sounds like. You'd rather talk to the robot. No, that makes sense. They can ask critical questions and things of that nature, you know. Still sounds a little bit work focused. You need to do a little less work, Jerry.
Oh, I mean, it's useful. I mean, there are so many tools out there. You have to spend time exploring it. And ChatGPT has come up with Sora, which generates videos. I have already been experimenting how it generates videos. I mean, what kind of a script do you give it to generate the right kind of a video that you want to see? I mean, the examples are awesome, but when I try to do it, I don't get anywhere.
Doesn't turn out that way, right? How about yourself, Durga? Any personal use cases that you've kind of you'd like to highlight?
Mostly my personal life use cases will be like gaining more knowledge, especially which is not available over the web. It can be like any tiny things which my son asks from his academic uh, to my day-to-day purchases, whatever it is, right? It's like as Jerry said, it became a companion, right? When I'm trying to take a decision, right? Whether we have thought about that purchase decision or whatever it is in all the aspects. So I can go to the GPT and ask, hey, this is what I have considered. Let's say I'm planning to make an investment, right? In a certain area, right? And we do a lot of research on the web to find out what is the opt location and all those things. But it always limited to whatever we saw first, right? The famous website always like they pamper the data for their ratings and other use cases. Where when we use these companions, right, chat GPT or any other things, they go beyond the top listed ones. They try to find out different use cases and provide a new data points, right? Provide new data point, bring out new data points, which changes our uh, thinking structure at all completely. Hey, this is a silly thing which I have missed, which I shouldn't have missed, and very crucial for taking the decision, right? Yeah, this is like fantastic, doing fantastic job and helping me in taking the right decision, especially when I'm doing purchases and improvising the knowledge. And I'm saying that it's a complex problem, but I'm solving easily with GPT, and it gives a clear analysis on how it has solved it, reasoning with all the reasonings with more examples where I take the credit on behalf of GPT that I solved it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll be interested. That's actually another you highlighted another topic. You know, what is the impact of the ChatGPT landscape and SEO, search engine optimization, right? Because exactly what you said, pampered data, a lot of companies, structured themselves to be top of mind for Google. But now ChatGPT is a little bit more sophisticated than that and scrapes Google beyond just the keywords and the buzzwords, but synthesizes the information a little bit more readily. So I don't know if we'll have the answer to that, but it's something to kind of think about as a potential topic. I'll give one more. I'll give one use case that I'm using it for. So my son is nearly 5 years old. I coach his soccer team. So I'm the head coach for 12 children between the ages of 4 and 5. So it can be, I don't know if you've ever managed a group of 4-year-olds, but it can be difficult keeping them engaged and keeping them interested. So what I asked ChatGPT to do is give me a practice outline for geared towards 4 and 5-year-olds that uses narrative-based soccer games that improve their skills in dribbling and shooting. So I'm actually using one of those practice plans today, so I'll let you guys know how that goes. But I was
Sure.
pretty impressed by what it kind of came up with, in a very creative sense there of, okay, well, how do I, you know, get a 4-year-old excited about dribbling exercise? Oh, well, you know, instead of a soccer ball, you know, it's a dragon that you need to like save the egg and get it into the nest before it like hatches or something like that. You know, just silly little things like that. But there's a million use cases that people are just starting to kind of scratch the surface of. All right,
Have
I
you
think
tried
that.
to?
Hmm?
I was just wondering, I mean, on those same lines, have you tried to create a custom model using ChatGPT for that, or is it's just a chat that you're using for the discussion?
Just pretty wide open. No, I haven't really dipped my toes into the custom models.
I mean, you should
Yeah.
probably take a look at that. You could create a small personal coach for 4 to 5 year old soccer coach as a model, and you can provide it some information about the specific kids or what they like, and then it
Sure.
would actually tailor it a little bit more, and you will get responses that are tailored to the target audience.
That's an interesting
Should-
thought. Maybe I'll do like a survey of the children today, do some data gathering that I can then pump into a custom
Yeah.
assistant coach. That'd be an interesting thought and use case. I like that idea.